Ringing in the new year with more executive orders. President Obama's new White House counselor, John Podesta, he wrote the book on how to use them to bypass Congress and push through progressive policies on his own. This is what Podesta said very bluntly back in 2010. The ability of President Obama to accomplish important change through these powers should not be underestimated. Well, now some here say that means taxpayers better hold on to their wallets in 2014. Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Elizabeth McDonald, Sabrina Schaeffer, Mark Taggi, and John Tamny. So, Steve, are these going to help or hurt the economy, these extra powers?
Well, with this administration, they're going to hurt the economy, and you already see it. The IRS is now going after conservative groups under rulemaking, even though they did it illegally before. EPA is still going after fracking and shutting down the coal industry. You see it in the Federal Reserve. You see it in other agencies. And their attitude is, we'll do the laws, do the decrees like a third world country, and let the courts clean it up later.
So, Mark Taggi, extra powers for the president means extra costs for taxpayers.
Well, look, let's put this in perspective. Just about every president has pursued some sort of an agenda, and they've pursued it through executive orders. I mean, going way back to Ronald Reagan and his firing of the air traffic controllers. So why shouldn't Obama use this tool at a time when Congress is in a stalemate? And plus, I think you're forgetting that there's a lot of positive things that come out of executive orders. Things as far as aid for Hurricane Sandy victims, expedited review of cancer drugs, things dealing with non-use of or prohibition of biological agents in warfare.
Well,
so,
Rich,
why are executive orders an evil thing?
Rich, it is true that other presidents have used executive orders. However, this blueprint, the blueprint that Podesta outlined in 2010, which he will probably implement in 2014, goes way beyond what other presidents have done.
Yeah, Mark has a point about executive orders. You can look it up. Obama has not used that very often. He has used other kinds of orders to completely disrupt the economy. He's changed his own health care law 14 times. That's pretty dubious and constitutionally questionable. It has thrown 1/6 of the economy into chaos. You looked after the BP oil spill. He fined, without any authority at all, BP $20 billion. He suspended drilling in the Gulf, again, without any authority. So what really it put the official words executive orders aside and look at the amount of manipulation this president has done in the economy.
And EMAC, I would add to that list, by the way, GM bondholders who lost all their stuff due to the car czar. So there are a lot of things, but combine all he has done with the new executive order policy of Podesta, that's kind of scary, no?
Yeah, because it's about unchecked authority, right? And that's what we're really talking about. It's also it's bad for taxpayers because it makes the government even less transparent. It makes it about as transparent as a bucket of molasses. The fear of executive orders to bring us into military action, say in Libya or Syria, is always a fear there. And the thing is, we've got a government now that is in love with reform no matter what. We don't need any more reform. We need reform of the big things like entitlements. That's not happening. That should go through Congress. But, the thing is, when you change the rules, when you do things like executive orders, it also breeds a cynicism. It breeds a cynicism on the part of taxpayers. So if you're going to be changing things all the time, then why follow the laws?
And it's not what our founders had in mind. I mean, they had this check and balance system, which there is none of in executive orders. And, John, frankly, our stock market is very happy with divided government, is it not?
Oh, no question. When politicians are playing around with laws and legislating, taxpayers should watch their wallets, and you should also watch the stock market with fear. And that's why I'm a little bit more optimistic about this. President Obama's legislative program ended a year ago. You've seen that in a major stock market rally since then. History says that second-term presidents get very little done, and the notion that someone who's overseen such a failed legislation, his signature legislation, will achieve a lot, I don't think is credible.
And Sabrina, this is a president who really likes to get things done. I mean, you see what he did in the first term, in his first 2 years when he had Congress and everything. He might get frustrated. He might get desperate and perhaps use these powers to an extent he hasn't yet.
Yeah, and that's exactly the reason that we're seeing this right now, because obviously in the second term, we know that President Obama is not going to be able to get his next signature domestic issue, climate change, accomplished without orders to help him, and we already have seen some of this, leading up to this. But sometimes it goes beyond dollars and cents. I looked back at some of the executive orders. Recently, he administered one to change the discipline culture at public schools. Well, this is in effect a discipline quota. It doesn't actually help students who are trapped in failing schools. It avoids the hard work of passing something through proper congressional channels.
Sabrina points out a great thing, Steve, which is that education is a big part of this agenda. And again, you look at the educational record, like the record of a lot of things with this administration, that kind of policy doesn't seem to work.
No, it doesn't. And this is an example of government overreach. Remember, David, regulation is a form of taxation, and there are very few restrictions on it, especially with these so-called independent agencies. They can pretty much do what they want, and it's very, very hard to turn them back. And that imposes a real cost. So even though he's going to be stymied in Congress, he's going to go full bore. You saw what he did with the D.C. appellate court, appointed 3 judges. They weren't needed. Judges are under work there. He appointed them to rig the courts, and you're going to see that rigging elsewhere.
Mark Tangi, I would guess that when President Nixon was in power, you used the term imperial presidency once or twice. I mean, doesn't that thought of a strong presidency is one thing, but an imperial presidency is something else. I don't think you want that, do you?
I don't think we have any more of an imperial presidency now than we did under George Herbert Walker Bush or Ronald Reagan, who has all that legacy about him. So, look, presidents issue orders. It's an ability. It's a checked power. It's something that's given to them by the Constitution. And Congress is doing nothing. We have a do-nothing Congress that's stalemated, that can't even agree on a budget.
Well, Congress is doing a lot. They're preventing the overreach of big government, right, Emac? That's very significant, I think, Emac.
Yeah, I hear your point. By the way, the Senate did just enact a budget, but finally, we were like Belgium going without a budget for years.
Yeah.
But, the question is, and it's a good one that you raised, David. These are also extraordinary actions that are now becoming ordinary. They should not be ordinary. Right. And Jonathan Turley, the historian, just recently said that this president is behaving worse than other presidents in recent history. Yes, George W. Bush did a lot of signing statements, but President Obama is doing worse and doing more signing statements than ever before and enacting this barbed wire pile of rules and regulations.
We went through the list before. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Well, Emac is right. One of the real problems is that you don't have any means for debate when you have an executive order, right? Especially on the issue of climate change, for instance. If we were going to have, actual legislation, there would be a conversation for the American people to take part in. But with the executive order, what you're finding is that the president is setting up a task force made up almost entirely of Democrats, for instance, in which the American people don't even know this is happening. They don't have a chance to voice their opinion. So I think that the transparency issue has gone out the window.
Well, and John Tamny, I know a lot of people in the opposition, a lot of the Republicans say, hey, look, just sit back. He's a wounded president. He's not going to get much done. But the fact that he brought Podesta in, the fact that Podesta does have this plan, a very specific plan of moving things towards a progressive agenda ahead without Congress, doesn't that make you a little nervous?
It makes me a little nervous, but that's the point of electing Republicans to begin with, to create this gridlock that we want. Mark talks about a do-nothing Congress. To me, that sounds beautiful. One of the most animating features of the Constitution is that we block people from getting things done. It's the job of the Republicans. They were elected to block a president.
Let's just get rid of Congress,
and we'll be fine.
Well, Rich Karlgaard, Rich Karlgaard, the fact is Congress didn't used to be as obtrusive as it is now. It was only in power for a couple of weeks every year.
Yeah, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton worked together, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan. This president has not crossed the aisle in any meaningful way. He's surprised that he has no support. He'd had not a single Republican vote in the House or Senate for his health care bill. Look, what he's really shown is that he's kind of a sneaky president. He's not very transparent, Mark.
It's not
this is one of the least transparent presidencies that we've ever seen. I think this is more dangerous than I wish I could share John Tamny's optimism.
All right, we got to leave it at that. Last word from the publisher. Coming up next, Target gets hacked, and the law says immediately tell your customers. But guess what the health care law says if the ObamaCare website gets hacked? This one will have you saying, what the heck? So a lot more Target customers are planning to sue the retailer over the massive credit card breach. Now, federal law required that company to inform shoppers that it was hacked. But guess this. If the ObamaCare website gets hacked, well, a new report says good luck finding out because the health care law does not require the government to report it. And Rich says that is putting Americans' most personal information at risk. Explain, Rich.
Yeah, really in two ways, David. I mean, number one, look at what this administration has done through the IRS, through the NSA, and through other agencies to spy on Americans. So you have that risk from the government itself. And then you have the hacker risk. Hacker or security experts like John McAfee months and months ago warned about how porous ObamaCare is. So that for hackers to come in and steal accounts and steal information is a real threat.
It's not only a real threat, it's happened, Mark. The DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, has reported 16 times there have been cyber attacks on this information.
Well, I'm not aware of that, David. I think what we really should be looking at is protecting people's private information as a result to business mining our private data and then selling us. That we don't want and tracking us.
Shouldn't we
and
also,
government too?
Hold on. Okay, government as well. You're willing to sign on to that?
I am, but this is fear-mongering. There hasn't been a problem with the ObamaCare site.
Wow.
And so why are we even worried about this when we have genuine problems related to NSA
Sabrina,
spying and relating to business?
That's your question, and let me answer your question. The reason why we do is because not only has DHS warned that it's happened, but we also have anecdotes. The Minneapolis Star-Tribune noted that there was an insurance broker who received an email containing information on 2,400 people who'd signed up for MN Sure, the exchange in Minnesota. 2,400 people had information like Social Security numbers, personal business information exchanged with somebody outside the system. That's dangerous.
Absolutely, and we know that, for instance, in Vermont, there was another instance the week of Thanksgiving where somebody hacked into the system to show just how vulnerable that state exchange is. And we know that we have more than a dozen attorneys generals from around the country who have written to Secretary Sebelius imploring her to do more to make sure that those navigators, those people who are supposed to be helping people navigate the website, that they actually go through proper background checks. And the Secretary has not done any of that. We know that many of these people, some of them are good, but some of them have been sort of chosen haphazardly, and they have all sorts of access to our personal information. So unfortunately, I think that identity theft is not going to be just a side effect. It is a symptom of this law.
And Steve, now people under the force of law are being compelled to put information that may not be safe into these exchanges.
Yeah, and young people aren't going to do it, and it's going to be an election issue next year. And this law is hurting the most vulnerable. The most vulnerable are going to go on those exchanges to get the insurance. They're the ones that can't protect themselves, so it's an outrage.
John, that's a great point. The fact that a lot of the younger people who aren't going to do it or who have been reluctant to do it are pulling back, but it's the older folks who are less computer savvy. They're really going to get hurt by this.
Well, you know, it's another very troubling aspect of the Obamacare law, but what's interesting here is I think the private sector is going to bail the Obama administration out. When in the private sector, when we open up a bank account or we get a credit card, we are essentially buying identity theft protection. If our withdrawals look funny, if our charge patterns look funny, they shut down those accounts to protect us until we can explain the charges. And so assuming the ACA pursues a sieve for private information, it will oddly enough be the private sector that saves individuals from the Obama administration.
EMAC, will the private sector come charging to the defense of our privacy?
And it's a funny twist. Remember the president said to the private sector, hey, you didn't build that. Well, now the private sector can say to the president, you didn't build that correctly. So we're going to have to step in. But here's the thing. We've got Representative Diane Black, Republican out of Tennessee, saying that, you know what, the government should tell Americans exactly when and how they were hacked into, if they're hacked into on those healthcare sites. I can't believe it's come to this. We've only just rolled out the law, and we're talking about people's household income and their personal information now getting hacked into. That's stunning.
And David, they were warned in advance that this was going to be a huge problem, and they ignored it. If you did that in the private sector, you'd be drowning in lawsuits.
Well, Rich, you're in Silicon Valley. You know the computer industry very well. Is there a way out of this? Is there a way to build the firewalls for a system like this?
Probably not. I mean, what might save Obamacare is that it's so unsuccessful that the hackers won't have that many targets. But I say that somewhat facetiously. Steve is absolutely right. The vulnerable people are the older people. You can just see the kind of fraudulent reverse mortgage plays and things like that to separate older people from what remaining assets they have.
Coming up next, this year's countdown to the ball drop could jack up the job list. What 13 states are about to do that may be very unlucky for jobs everywhere. That's at the bottom of the hour. But first, right here, disorder in the court. A list of the craziest lawsuits of 2013 will make you crazy until you hear the Forbes plan to bring sanity back to our legal system.